My name is Dr. Anita Leffel. I'm the founder of Silver Founder Academy. It's an organization whose mission is to help those people over the age of 50 become business owners. So if you have any questions or comments after our brief conversation today, please join me on Slack. The link will be on our website, and I think it's also in the notes. Website is silverfounderacademy.com. This conversation will be the first of a few that I want to have in talking about major changes in careers after the age of 50. Now, I want to make sure that you understand you don't have to be on the other side of 50 to join in this conversation. The problem is, in fact, that we're divided into camps. We have the young, and then we have the old. So I want to start with where I am now and how I got to where I am. I never thought about age or my aging. I was running marathons. In fact, I ran 9, and I even qualified for Boston. And if you know anything about running marathons, then you realize that that's a big deal. Actually, when I stopped, my best time was 3 hours and 28 minutes. But I was bordering on managing myself as a semi-professional. I was taking care of myself. So one day I came in from running, and I looked in the mirror, and I saw this old person looking back at me. Holy crap, that's not me, no way. But it was. Now, I may have looked bad, but I thought, oh my God. Why was I shocked when I looked in the mirror that day? Because our culture tells us that beauty lies in youth. Smooth face, no wrinkles, no dark spots, and certainly no graying or even sagging. Our culture and the beauty industry has taught us that. It's ingrained in us. So Jane Fonda, who I'll refer to a few times this afternoon, but a few times, she says about the aging process. She says there's young, there's midlife, and then there's decrepitude. It's our culture just hasn't caught up with what it means for those of us who are changing the aging paradigm, like who are saying that we are not too old to dress like that or to do what we want to do. But it's our culture that's forcing us to say something about no age appropriate. I remember one time years ago, I was watching Andy Rooney when he was alive. And he said, the idea of living a long life appeals to everyone, but the idea of getting old appeals to no one. Let me interject a funny story here. One day after work, I was driving home, and as I always did, I called one of my kids, and I happened to call my daughter on the phone. And as we're talking, I said, oh, damn, I gotta go back to work. I forgot my phone. There was this long pause, and she says, Mom, aren't you talking on your phone? I'm not embarrassed to say that, but I'm glad I got it out so that she can now stop bugging me about that. AARP CEO said, she wrote a book on disrupt aging. And she said that we've added more years to the average life expectancy in this century than in all previous history combined. In fact, research shows that it's nearly 30 more years. And to my account, that's another life. Jane Fonda calls that her life's third act. Think about that. What does that mean to you? Or what does that mean to me that there might be 30 more years that I have? So I heard this idea from someone, I think it was in a book, Chip Conley's book, Wisdom at Work, or his TED Talk, but he said everyone who turns 50 should get a letter that asks, if you live to be 100 years old, what talent, what skill, what interest would you pursue? Here I am. Though I've been entrepreneurial most of my life, I'm now an entrepreneur, a business owner. But this is not a stretch. Nationally, the share of new entrepreneurs between the ages of 55 and 64 increased more than any other age range over this last 2 decades. That means that about 1996, there were 15% of that age group in entrepreneurship, to now over 25%, 2016 report. I've written a lot of things about this, and I've posted some resources on my website. So, feel free, please check it out. But how did I get here? So let me back up and tell you. Um, Teaching entrepreneurship for 15 years, I've helped many nascent entrepreneurs, hundreds, to achieve their dream of business ownership. I was having the time of my life. There was nothing more rewarding to me than to watch someone go from student to entrepreneur. I was so excited as they broke away from my reins and achieved whatever it was that they had wanted, because they could. But I accepted another position as an administrator in another university. And so my responsibilities, my time and energy switched from solving students' problems to solving universities' problems. And I missed the interaction of students and business owners. I didn't want to end my career this way. I remember years ago when I first graduated college that I read T.S. Eliot, and he was talking about the passing of time and of one's life. And he said, this is the way the world ends, not in a bang, but a whimper. And I said, no way, this is not how I'm going to end. So I need to interject something about the R word, retirement. Did you know that there are 75 million boomers between the ages of 51 and 69 in the United States? And every single day, there are 10,000 who retire. But that leaves a huge amount who are not retiring. In fact, 65% of baby boomers today have said, I'm not going to retire at the age of 65. They're looking for something else to do. They want to continue. Some of them have to, some of them want to. And I was not interested or even considering retiring. So I resigned, and I decided I was going to pivot to another direction. But when it came time for me to look at achieving my own goals, I knew that I had to change my perspective. Again, I'm going to refer to my favorite person these days, Jane Fonda, who says, wisdom is not experience, but how we interpret that experience that makes us wise and makes us whole. It brings wisdom and authenticity. It helps us realize what we could have been. So I began to interpret and reinterpret my experiences. So when it came to achieving my own goals, my perspective had to change from teacher to student, from mentor to being mentored. And over the years, I was becoming quite good at advising, but now I had to advise myself. That's like a doctor trying to treat herself out of an illness. It can't be done. I had to change my mindset. So how do you do that? What does that look like when you change a mindset? I'll answer that with a few resources that that I've put on the website, and I even was on a podcast, Keep It Juicy, where I talked about changed mindset. But I'll tell you about this in a few minutes. But anyway, I taught students that entrepreneurship starts with the entrepreneur, of course. And unless you know yourself very well, don't even start. So I had to understand myself. So I turned to resources to guide me in this introspection. I became a learner. So I first turned to business books, the background that I'm familiar with, and actually even used the business model canvas to develop my own personal vision and mission and value statement. I read many books and many articles that helped me give me a new perspective on who I was and who I could be. So let me mention a couple of them that come to mind recently that I've read. One article is called Beginner Again, and I've given you the link in the notes. But anyway, I learned from that article that I didn't have to change myself. I just had to change the way I looked at myself. And so, if you've ever started over as a result of a move or a new job or a new chapter in your life changes. I'm sure, like me, you felt excited and concerned and sadness and all of these emotions, and certainly a lot of stress. When we moved from Texas to California nearly 4 years ago, we had to downsize. Now, let me tell you, Texans do not know how to downsize, but we tried. We worked on that very, very hard. We had to give up a lot of our belongings, and that, quite frankly, was very difficult to do. They were, even though they were sitting around and they were collecting dust and they were really unappreciated, but it was sad because it was like giving up on my memories. But in the same time, in the same way, became really refreshing. I gave myself patience and the permission to move out of my comfort zone. And I realized how refreshing and renewing that felt. It's what else I learned from this Beginner Again article is what she says about herself. Age may be cruel, but it allows you to be kinder to yourself. So my frustration is to be expected. My fears, my stress, everything is to be expected. So I accept them for what they are, and I know that I have to just keep moving forward. Another resource, there's this book called How Do I Get There From Here? It's also, I've put a link to it in the notes. And the author gave me a perspective that I thought was very interesting. He said, imagine that you stepped off of a ship onto the beach. You don't know the territory, you don't know the culture, you don't know the rules, the language, you don't know whether or not even your experiences can help you. How do you find out? What do you do? And he said, you pioneer your way through transition after transition. You pioneer your way. That struck me because in starting a business, that's just like starting a business. You are a pioneer, no matter whether you've started one business or no businesses in the past. It is an analogy to me to being that you are a pioneer. So this was just like something that I had been teaching all along. And certainly coming from Texas, when he used the word pioneer, boy, I clinged on that real fast. But however, something funny, Mark Twain, and I've always quoted this many, many times. Mark Twain said, if life would be infinitely happier if we could only be born at the age of 80 and gradually approach 18. When I think about that, if I had the wisdom and experience of life that I have right now, but was in an 18-year-old body with that energy and the enthusiasm and the motivation, I know I would be so much more productive and accomplish my goals faster. Everything that I'm working on now in this last third of my life would go much easier. But it's going, it's good. So why Silver Founder Academy? Well, I knew that I wanted to turn to entrepreneurship, and that's been my life for many years. When you look for a business opportunity, you have to look at yourself first. You have to look at your passions. You have to look at what it is that you can do. And then you decide whether or not what you can do can help someone else with a problem they may have. And so as a baby boomer and looking for opportunities, I looked within my own sector of society and baby boomers. And I really became familiar with what they were going through, what we are all going through, and whether or not my knowledge and experience could help. And I've written about that and posted some resources on the website. But what I learned, two things that I really learned that really helped me a lot. Number one, I do have a customer base. I did find that baby boomers could use some of my help. But number two, I discovered the problem. And that problem is what I was experiencing and have been experiencing. The trouble finding information on the internet and elsewhere is tremendous. There's a lot of information, but it's overwhelming, and there's a lot of noise. There's books, and there's people, and there's resources on the ground and on the phone and on websites and on webinars. But I had to know what I was specifically looking for in order to find the resources that I need. And so that's why I formed Silver Founder Academy. And that's what we do is we filter, we tailor information for those who want to start over and go into business after the age of 50. That doesn't mean that someone over the age of 50 needs different information than someone under that age. It just means that we're grouping resources together so that we cut out the noise and you can get to the information faster. What have I learned over time? Well, I've written a lot about that in some of my blogs, and one of the blogs, How to Start Over, I even made some suggestions. But let me add to some of those suggestions and maybe even a couple of lessons. So my first, I'll refer back to Chip Conley, who's written, this is a phenomenal book, Wisdom at Work, and I really suggest it. But he was describing that in his maturing self, he wanted to move in a positive way to become an elder, not someone older. So he had to strategically forget part of his historical professional identity, which was he was a business owner, a very successful one for many, many years. And now he was going to become first an intern and then a mentor and a guide. So, but what he says is, and resonated with me, is you have to dump the baggage. And so for me, that process of dumping baggage started when we moved from Texas to California. So it wasn't just getting rid of furniture that was collecting dust and was useless, really. It was looking at past experiences and interpreting them and deciding what is useful and what really isn't. And that leads me to my attitude and attitude in general. Research found, and this is something that I've read just most recently, that people with a positive perception of aging lived, you believe this or not, 7.5 years longer than those that had a negative perception. And this article even goes on to explain that that's a bigger increase than in lifespan than that associated with doing exercising or not smoking. So the takeaway to that is your attitude. Enjoy the prospect of getting older. You'll live longer. The kind of reminded me of a quote that I read, General MacArthur, and he said appropriately, age wrinkles the body, but quitting wrinkles the soul. So the question is, how do you interpret your experiences? What do you do with that? Well, let me give you an example. I used to wake up in the morning with these negative thoughts. Damn, I wish I didn't have to get up. It's too cold. It's too hot. It's dark. I don't want to get up. I don't know what I'm doing. This is too much to do. And all this negative self-talk. But when I discovered that if I stopped from the very beginning, I started with a positive self-talk and get rid of all that negative thought. And even when I started having that negative thought, I would push it out of the way. I found that I became a good friend of myself when I stopped all that. When I was running marathons, though I didn't aspire to be in the Olympics, I just enjoyed running. But running taught me the importance of endurance, of working toward a goal and what it feels like to achieve that goal. I'm interpreting these experiences to help me. Another lesson, and this one I love because it happens to be from their researcher at my alma mater, Texas A&M University. And he was doing research on decision making. And the bottom line is that younger participants were making decisions that had immediate effects. But the older participants were making decisions that led to long-term goals. Does this tell you anything? It tells me we are valuable. I am valuable. And I do have a skill from my experiences. And so I mentioned mindset. How do you change your mindset? And I also said, we're going to talk about this. I want to have a couple more events like this. But there's a book called Mindset, and it's by Carol Dweck. And she says basically, and we'll talk about this next time, but she says basically there's two kinds of mindsets. There's the fixed and there's the growth. And once you become aware of your decision making and where you are, is this coming from fixed thoughts, or is this coming from your growth? You can then control how you move ahead. I have a growth mindset. I'll give you an example. I decided I wanted to relearn Spanish. I don't have time to go to class. I'm too busy. I just don't even know where I would go anyway right now. So what did I do? I'm learning it on an app on my phone called Duolingo. I'm keeping up with what's new and what's out there and what's certainly new to me. I mean, look at this. I'm sitting here having a discussion on Facebook. I never used this process in exchanging information. I always saw Facebook as a social thing, not as something exchanging information like this. And 16 years in the classroom and in front of live audiences is quite a different experience. It's a very big different event. Guess which one I like the most? Live audience, because I can see you and I can feel you and I can be part of you. Yet I'm here and I look forward to the other opportunities like this as well. I must mention, because I've talked about my athletic past, I just a couple of days ago read an article in the Psychology magazine written by an ultra athlete, and that was what attracted me to this, what he was talking about and how he experienced life and how he was translating his experiences. And so I realized that my marathons and my experience in marathons, I translated it also in the past to how I got through difficult times in my life. And how was this, what did I do when it came to marathons? I used my imagination. So let me explain this. So yes, I knew that I was going to run, and I never thought of it as a competition, but it was certainly a competition to myself. So I always wanted to do good. I always wanted to be the best. So the night before, I would imagine what it's like to run. What did I look like and feel like on the first mile? What did I look like on the second, the fifth, the 10th, the 15th? And each increment, I would look at myself and remind myself that I wanted to run and be strong and determined and capable and focused. And I really, really believe that translated into how I ran the next day. And I always felt like I ran very well. This was similar to what he was saying, and this is what prompted me to remember my own way of using this process. But he says that what he would do is he would take the confident words that others would say, and he would incorporate them. He would read them, and he'd incorporate them into his own thinking. And I remember seeing a quote from that he used in his, which was from Helen Keller, and it was something like, she said, "So much has been given to me, I don't have time to ponder what has been denied, what hasn't been given." So this meant that he could make these comments come true for him, that he would believe them. And you end up believing them. And the way we really realize the picture in our head and the words that we use, that's what will guide us. And so you have to be open to the definition of age and aging. You have to be open to the definition of aging of yourself. And another thing that I did that I recommend is I learned mindfulness. Mindfulness is, I'm sure you know, is a basic ability to kind of be present at the moment and aware of what you're doing and not so overly reactive to what's around you. Just like here, I'm here in an airplane and I hope you're not. But I also did meditation, and that's not just mindfulness, but it's part of mindfulness and being mindful. And so even though mindfulness is this sort of innate, we all have this innate ability, it can be cultivated. It can be become a technique that you can use in your everyday life. You can use it in, even when you're doing sports and when you're doing activities. And the benefits of meditating, listen, no one would be doing it if there weren't any. So when we're mindful, the research shows it reduces stress, it enhances performance, it gives us insight. And so I meditate every day. So one last piece of advice, suggestion: send yourself a note or post it on your mirror. It should say, "You're not too old." Maybe let's turn it around. "I'm not too old. It's not too late to start over. Don't be afraid to start over. It's a chance to rebuild your life the way you wanted all along. So I'm finished, but now what? I'm not finished. Let's continue this conversation. October 13th, I've scheduled another discussion like this on changing your mindset and learning the concept of something that I read: try, fail, learn, and then try again. And this is from the book Crushing It by Gary Vaynerchuk. And this is a piece of advice that he gave and gives to all entrepreneurs on their quest to becoming great entrepreneurs. He says, don't be afraid of making a mistake. And when I was reading that book, that advice touched a raw space in me. I didn't realize that I still had this raw space. And he said the ability of freeing yourself to try and fail can't be taught. You have to experience it. But why am I afraid? Why are we all afraid of making a mistake? Because we call it failure. We tend to call a mistake or even an attempt at doing something that we don't achieve a failure. And that's a negative mindset. And that can be cultivated, nourished, and nurtured and reinforced, and it can be changed. So remember, it's never too late to start over. It's a chance to rebuild your life the way you wanted all along. Join me next time in our conversation. And if you want to continue this conversation or in the future, please, I encourage you, join our Slack channel. And you can find the link on our website, silverfounderacademy.com, and I believe that you can find it on the link in the resources on this event. I've enjoyed this. I hope you have. If you have, you can like it. And if you also enjoyed it, please come back October 13th.